Guys, and welcome back to Gap Grace Point Online. Today is our last episode of our Stand Up series called Stay Standing. Remember, throughout this series, we've been looking at how God gives us the courage in all situations and in all places to stand up for what is right and for what God asks us to do. Just like in the book of Daniel, which we've been looking at, we see how God gives us the courage in real life situations to stand up for what is right. So let's have a look what our lesson is about today. In today's story, we find it in Daniel 6, verse 1 to 28, and we see how the king was tricked into doing something that he didn't want to do. In fact, it was something that he didn't think was right, but he had to do it because of what he was tricked by his officials and the people who he had appointed to help him. Daniel was a prophet of God who had been taken as one of the young men way back in the beginning when people were taken as captives to Babylon. Now, by this time, Daniel was 80 years old and he had served 3 kings. Now, this new king, King Darius, had decided to put a group of leaders together and some officials, and as part of that, he chose Daniel. Because Daniel was a wise and courageous leader, the king really liked Daniel, and because of that, he really trusted him. But Daniel was part of a group of leaders and a group of officials, and the king had used them to counsel him and to give him advice when he needed advice. Now, Daniel was really liked by the king, so the king wants to make him the most powerful ruler in the country besides him. But the other people were really jealous about this, so they looked for an opportunity to get rid of Daniel. They looked at his life and tried to see what he did wrong. But because Daniel was a man of God, there was nothing he did wrong. He was a moral leader. So they looked at other things that he did, and they tried to find a way that they could get rid of Daniel, but they really couldn't find anything. The only thing they could find was that Daniel really faithfully followed God. He even prayed to God 3 times a day. So they came up with a plan, a way to trick the king, and that was to get the king to make a law which would have anyone who prayed to anyone besides the king be thrown into a den of lions. The advisors came before the king and said that all his officials had agreed on this. So the king thought that Daniel had also agreed to this decree. And so he signed it and he said that this was what was going to happen. Unfortunately, Daniel was left out of this plan and the king was tricked. Soon Daniel heard about the law, but he knew that he was going to faithfully follow God despite this law being issued. He always was going to obey God, and he stood up for what he believed in, so he continued praying 3 times a day. He knew that disobeying this law would probably get him thrown into a den of lions, but regardless, he stood up for following God, and he continued to pray 3 times a day. One day while he was praying, his enemies were outside and waiting. They rushed in and they saw Daniel praying to the one true God. True as the law was, he was then thrown into a den of lions because the king had been tricked. The king realized he couldn't do anything to save Daniel, even though he did not want Daniel to be thrown into the den of lions. And so Daniel was thrown into the den of lions. A large stone was rolled over the opening of the den of lions, so Daniel could not escape. It was sure for these officials that he would die, and they would be rid of him forever. But the next morning, King Darius anxiously walked over to the den of lions and had the officials move the stone away. And Daniel was safe. He was alive, and the lions were lying there with their mouths closed. God had sent an angel to close the mouth of the lion so that Daniel would be safe and unharmed because Daniel had just been faithful. He had done nothing wrong. The king was delighted that Daniel was still alive, but he also remembered how the other officials had tricked him, and so he ordered for those officials to be thrown into the den of lions. This time, God did not shut the mouths of the lions, and all of them died for the dishonesty in trying to trick the king and trying to get rid of a faithful man of God in the form of Daniel. King Darius then also said that all people were to worship and respect the God of Daniel, the one true God. There are many things that we do in our daily lives, like eating, sleeping, our homework, but one of the things that we sometimes forget to do is pray. This is because there's often not an immediate consequence for not praying. For example, if you don't do your homework, you'll get in trouble with your teacher. If you don't eat, you'll be hungry. But sometimes when we pray, we don't have an immediate consequence. Yet we should still be praying faithfully every day, just like Daniel did. Sometimes it's difficult to pray and it's difficult to follow God, but we need to stand up and follow God courageously because God is faithful to us. Praying every day shows God that we love Him, want His help, and trust Him in our daily lives. Our memory verse for this week is from Psalm 86, verse 6 to 7 in the TEV Bible. Listen, Lord, to my prayer. Hear my cries for help. I call to you in times of trouble because you answer my prayers. Don't forget that in the comments below, we have a link for a resource that you can do to get into the material of this lesson and see how it applies to your life this week. We hope to see you next week again for our brand new series. Stay tuned to see what that'll be. Bye guys, see you next week.